like to ask everyone to take a moment in their seat and individually ask God to ready their hearts to hear from His Word, to let it do whatever it needs to do to soften our hearts. So let's take a moment and do that this morning. Dear Father, I thank you that you speak to us through your Word. I thank you for an opportunity that we have to study your Word together as a body. Whether someone's walking in those doors for the first time or they've been here for the 10,000th time, Father, I pray that your Word would speak to their hearts, to whatever situation they find themselves in. Lord, I ask that your Spirit would fall on this place, that your gospel would be preached, that you would speak through me and use me as an instrument, and that we would all leave here having had an experience with you, having had an experience of you teaching us through your Holy Spirit, through your word. In your name I pray. Amen. So, we've been in this series called The All-Inclusive Church. And we're in the last part of our series this morning where we're talking about all classes. And one of the things that I've said in the intro of the last two sermons is the reason why we're going through this series is this. The church growth movement of the 1950s said that it was easier to grow a church if you grabbed people that were all alike and put them in a room together and called that church. That when you start trying to mix up classes of people, races of people, ages of people, it gets all kinds of complicated. There's dividing walls there, and we just don't even want to deal with that. So let's not, and let's have a church for young people here, a church for black people here, Asian people here, Hispanics here. Rich people can go to this one, poor people can go to this one, and we'll all be separate, and it'll just be easier that way. Because everyone will be comfortable, because everyone sitting around them is just like they are. But the past 2 weeks, as we've looked at Scripture, we've seen that I don't really know if that's what Jesus had in mind when he was thinking of his church dying on the cross. I don't think Jesus was thinking, yeah, let's keep those dividing walls up and just put church around society and let society determine how we do church. Jesus, to me, was a radical. He tore down walls. He tore down barriers. When he died, the curtain was torn in two. And so Jesus is saying, guys, that's not the church that I had in mind for you. And we talked about how the church should be for the old and the young together, working together, honoring God, helping each other, teaching one another what we know. We talked about how the church should be for all races, not just people like me. That our congregations should look like a melting pot of different colors of skin, of different tongues, of different ethnicities, because it brings honor and glory to our King. And the world will look at us and say, how did they do that? And the only thing they can do is glorify God in heaven and become one of us. And this morning, we're going to look at how the church is for all classes of people. The church is for the rich, the poor, the middle class. No matter what socioeconomic group you find yourself in, the church is for you. And our churches should be a mix of those kinds of people, not separated. Because the reality is that money is a dividing line for people. If you haven't figured that out yet, just turn the news on, and you'll find that it's a reality. So many wars have been fought because somebody needed more resources or wanted the riches of another nation. Revolutions have happened in numerous countries because one class of people said, enough with this other class, we're done. Example, the French Revolution. The poor class said, we're done with you rich snobs, get out of here. And they didn't say, leave, please. They killed people. We've got stories like Robin Hood where we talk about stealing from the rich to give to the poor. And if you just look at our own nation's history, in different cities, in different states, in different eras, there have all been times where one class is lording over another class, and there's tension, there's a dividing wall, and people hate each other, not because of the color of their skin, not because of their age, but because of the money that is or is not in their bank accounts. And it's still true today. We have a presidential candidate who is basically running on that ticket. That poor people are fed up with rich people having everything, and it's time to have a level playing field. We have governments that have popped up on that basis right there. This isn't fair, so we're going to knock you guys down a few pegs, and we're going to bring you guys up a few pegs. And we're not here to debate whether that does or doesn't work. The reality is, it's reality. And that's where we find ourselves this morning. Because money divides people. So then, if money's so divisive, and yet here I am saying that we're supposed to have rich and poor together, how in the world do we make that happen? Well, we should probably turn to the words of none other than Jesus Christ himself. Let's see what he has to say about money. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. That's a couple of weeks ago, about a month and a half ago, we were in the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6. This is not in the Lord's Prayer, this is after that. Jesus is still in the Sermon on the Mount, where he is talking about how God is more concerned about your heart than he is about your actions. He, in fact, wants the heart behind your actions to be with him. And Jesus here talks about money. And he starts out, I need to break this down for you. First, he starts out with a logical argument. And then he gets down into the deeper spiritual meaning behind his logical argument. And then he makes us choose. He gives us a choice. So we're going to break this down into 3 sections this morning. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." All right, so Jesus starts right off the bat, very logical argument. Hey, if all you do is spend your time gathering things of this world, it's all going to go away eventually. And he uses what might be some antiquated models of how our wealth and prosperity can go away. Because let's be honest, in today's world of windows and AC units and heating units, we don't really have a problem with moths anymore. I don't even think you can buy mothballs in the store anymore. Alright? I mean, I know when I went to buy a suit, when I first became a pastor and I had to do a wedding, I didn't have a suit. Alright, I went to go buy one, they were like, "Would you like, for $20 extra, this cedar hanger, which will repel moths?" And I was like, "What's a moth?" I don't know what you're talking about. What do they do? See, moths, for you younger people, will eat your clothing. Alright? They feed on your clothing. Alright, and so what would happen back in Jesus' day, and even probably back in the heyday of some of you in here, moths would get into your closets, they would get into your wardrobe, and they would eat holes in your clothes. I'm going to be honest with you, you don't want to show up to a wedding as the pastor with a hole right here because a moth ate it and you can see your shirt. It's just awkward. Everybody thinks, what is wrong with that guy? So Jesus makes an argument with these people, hey, all those nice clothes that you have, the silk, the purple linens, all of that, you know moths eat that, right? And it was a very real problem because they didn't have windows and AC units back in Jesus' day. Any little critters going to walk up in your house. I don't know about you, but that would freak my wife out, and it would probably freak me out a little bit too. Cockroaches looking up with cockroaches on your face. Thank God for windows and AC units. But then Jesus uses rust as a way that it destroys our wealth. And we don't have, okay, we have coins, but they're worth like nothing. You can't buy anything for a coin now. It feels like I got to throw a $10 bill just to get a gumball out of a machine. But back in Jesus' day, everything was metal coins. That was the currency. All right? And even if you didn't have metal coins, if you just had like some gold or some silver that you could weigh out, you know what happens to metal when exposed to the elements for a long time? It corrodes or it rusts. And rusty metal is worthless. And so what might happen is you have a bunch of gold, right? You go dig a hole, and you throw your gold in the hole, and you're like, woo, woo, retirement, I'm going to be rich. And then you go find that hole one day, and you dig it back up, and all it is rusty coins. Yeah, so much for that. And so Jesus is saying, hey, don't put trust in those types of things because they pass away. They're not eternal. And even more than that, even if your clothing makes it, you invent mothballs in my day, and your clothing makes it, and you figure out a way to protect your money from the elements, you know what? A thief can still break into your house and steal from you. And in their day, it wasn't hard. Okay, they didn't have security systems, all right? They had like thatched roofs. If a robber wanted to, he could literally get on the roof of your house and go, BAM! Oh, look, there's a hole in your roof. Whee! And take all your money and stuff and run off with it. It was a very real problem. And we have the same problem today. Although our thieves look a little bit different. They hide behind computers and they steal your identity. They take your credit card numbers, those types of things. Jesus' point still rings true today. And although maybe moth and rust is a little antiquated, I think there's one that's even better. Technology. Technology invalidates technology. You don't need something else to make technology irrelevant. Technology does it itself. I can't figure out everything that my new phone does before a new one comes out and that one's obsolete. I get a new TV hanging on the wall, like, sweet, just paid $350 for this 37-inch. And then I can go to the store a week later and buy a 50-inch for cheaper than I bought my 37-inch. And then, what? No! Technology makes other technology invalid like that. And so if all I'm doing is storing up my wealth and my riches in technological advances, man, I'm going to find myself having to constantly buy new and new and new and new things every single week. So why in the world would I put my hope in that kind of thing? Why in the world would I put my hope in the bank account that I have when apparently someone can just hack into Bank of America and take all my money? When all they have to do is walk by with a little card reader, get my card number, and oh look, all your little bit of money is mine now. When someone can literally steal my identity, claim to be me, and rack up tens of thousands of dollars in debt that I now have to deal with. Why would I put my hope in those kinds of things? It doesn't make any sense. And that's Jesus' argument here. All of those things will pass away. They'll get old, or they'll get stolen. Or at the very least, if you die, there is absolutely no way you're taking it with you. So why put your hope in it? Instead, why not put your hope in eternal things? Why not put your hope in the wisdom of God that cannot be taken away from you? Why not put your hope in sharing Christ with others so that they too can live in eternity? Because these things will never pass away, and these things no thief can steal. So that's Jesus' logical argument about money. But some of you might be saying, Jared, you know what? I can't put my faith in wealth and things because I don't have enough money to have wealth and things. And I'm just going to tell you, preach it. I hear you. Okay? Now, in worldly terms, we're very wealthy in this country, and most all of us live in the top 1 or 2%. But in the Woodlands, okay, it's like pales in comparison type thing. I see Lamborghinis all the time. I'm like, man, I can't even afford to rent one for the weekend just to go for a joyride. And there's this stark difference between wealthy and not wealthy. And sometimes all you gotta do is cross the train tracks. In our case, literally, if you just cross the train tracks on the other side of I-45, it's night and day. But, Jared, if I don't have that much, it's not really a worry of mine, right? That's not really something that I have to deal with. Well, if that's where you stand, I resonate with you, but Jesus doesn't. Let's see what he says here in verse 22. It says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Well, that made absolutely no sense to me. I don't know about you. How does that have anything to do with money? Well, let me give you some context. In ancient times, it was believed that the eyes emitted small amounts of light, and that this was how people were able to see, especially in the dark. Nowadays, we know that it's light actually enters through the eyes and is processed in the frontal lobe of your brain, and there's all kinds of refraction, and in technical terms that I don't know because I don't work on my eyes. But back then, they thought the eyes as small lamps that lit the way for our bodies to know where they were going. So what you would do is you would set your eyes on where you're going, and your eyes would light your path, and that's where I'm going. So I turn here, okay, I need to turn now. Okay, that's like a horse being led with some reins, right? That's what they thought. And because that's what they thought, Jesus is using this as a metaphor for us. He says that if we focus on the light, we will be filled with light so that it can be emitted, and those are the steps that we take. But if all we do is focus on the darkness, then the lamps of our eyes will be filled with darkness. And that is what we will walk in. You get what he's saying here? If you focus on him, if you focus on his word, if you focus on being obedient to the Father, you'll be filled with light. Because that's what you're putting in, that's what's going to come out. And that will be what decides your goals, your path in life. But if you focus on the world, if you focus on worldly things, ultimately on darkness, then that is what's going to be emitted from the lights of your eyes. And that will be how you walk. And you will walk in darkness. Now, I don't know about you, but I can fixate on the things of this world. Sometimes it's things that I want but can't afford. And sometimes it's things I can't afford. But when I can't afford something, yeah, I'm going to have the money to actually go buy that thing and put it in my house and have more stuff. But it doesn't stop me from window shopping. Or should I say windows shopping? You like that? Amazon.com, man. Hours and hours scrolling through. Oh, man, if only I could. Ladies, Pinterest, let's not kid ourselves here, okay? Oh my gosh, that house is beautiful and costs $560,000 and you work at McDonald's and you're 17. Not happening anytime soon. But we put it on our boards for one day. All the time, guys, all we do is we go out and we look at things that we cannot have. That Lamborghini drives down the road. Oh man, if only. Somebody's got a Lexus, a Mercedes. I drive a Honda. Oh man, I so wish one day I could have that. And I spend so much time wanting and wanting and wanting. And here's what happens. Finally, that Lexus drives by. And I don't like the person driving that car. Because they have what I want. I see that house on Pinterest. I'm envious of the people on HGTV buying these houses. That's what I want. You can afford it, I can't. We drive through neighborhoods here. Beautiful houses. Drive down Woodlands Parkway across the lake. See those mansions out there. We have disdain for those people in our hearts. Because they're better off than we are. And so I become envious. And I become jealous. And I start to think it's not fair. Those people would just share some of what they had. I wouldn't have to live in the poverty that I live in. It's wrong, and it needs to be corrected, and it's not okay. And so I hate people because they have what I don't have. I've probably never even met them. Or this happens. I have a lot, and I feel like other people want what I have. I feel like they're jealous and envious of me. And they're coming to steal my stuff, or they're trying to make it to where I have to give them the things that I own. And so I have disdain for those people. Or I feel like they're lazy. I worked hard and look where it got me. Obviously, you must be a lazy good-for-nothing because you can't get where I'm at. Look, I've worked at some places where the patrons were quite wealthy, and I felt that way before. You can't afford this car, so I must be better than you. I've worked at the country club, where the guy told me I was lazy because I have a better job than this if I wasn't. And he thought it was his job to teach me what it meant to work hard so that one day I could be like him. You can hear it in my voice, the disdain both he had for me and I had for him. Do you see how this has snowballed? Where did we start? We started with, I just want that. Man, I wish one day I could have that thing. And it's snowballed into greed and jealousy and selfishness and me want more. And it's turned to hate. It's built dividing walls between me and other people. All because of money. Because of things. Man, that's the world criminal. Money makes us either selfish and greedy, thinking that others are just jealous of wanting to take what we've worked so hard for, or it makes us jealous and envious of those who have more than we do, and we dislike them for not sharing a piece of the pie with us. So do you see now how when we focus on the things of this world, we end up getting filled with darkness? My desire for money and things affects the way I see people. Regardless of how much money I do or do not have, my desire for more affects the way that I see people because I assign them value based on the money they do or do not have in their bank accounts, the car that they do or do not drive, the neighborhood or house they do or do not live in. Money has changed the way I see people. And Paul wasn't kidding in 1 Timothy 6:10 when he said that the love of money is the root of all evil. We just walked it out. That snowball rolled up real quick. And that is why Jesus is warning us here. Because whatever we fix our gaze on is what's going to direct our path in life. We can be filled with light, or we can be filled with darkness. When you allow money and things to rule your life, regardless of the class you're in, lower, middle, upper, money and things will become a dividing line in your life. You will either end up jealous that you don't have what others have, or find yourself thinking you're better than others because you have more. And Satan knows this. Okay? Satan's end game here isn't just to make you want some stuff. Okay? He knows that when he gets you wanting stuff, it leads down this long rabbit hole, and you end up hating people who have more, or hating people who aren't like you because of stuff. And he uses money as his trickster. You see, because money promises all these things to us, right? At least that's what we think. Money says, hey, if you have me, there's hope. If you have me, there's happiness and fulfillment and purpose and power. But money is a lie. Do you know how I know that? Because I know both rich people and poor people whose marriages are falling apart. Because I know both rich people and poor people whose kids they can't control. I know rich people and poor people with addictions. I know rich people and poor people who struggle with self-image. Rich people, poor people, middle-class people, it doesn't matter what kind of money you have in your bank account, it does not take care of the sin problem in your life. But Satan has convinced us that if I just had a little bit more, it would take care of those issues. I'd have happiness, I'd have contentment, I wouldn't need any more. It doesn't matter if you're rich and you have a lot, or you're poor and you have very little. We all are trying to chase after this thing that Satan has convinced us will give us happiness and joy, and so we run in circles, and we don't even know it. And he uses the money to create dividing lines, not just in society, but in our churches. See, this sermon isn't just a sermon for individuals, it's a sermon for the church. Because the church has this problem too. When we start to focus on the worldly things that are church, we start to value people based on how they can or cannot help us attain a goal as a church. When all we want is a new building or a larger staff, then it becomes easy for me as a pastor or someone as an elder or even a church member to focus on people who can help make it happen. We begin to focus on reaching people who have the deep pocketbooks to finance a new building or ministry endeavor. We see people as opportunities for us to use them instead of opportunities for the gospel to be shared. And you might say, come on, Jared, that doesn't really happen in the church. And I would say, oh, indeed it does. I worked at a church. The community right outside of our doors was pretty poor. I'm not like destitute poor, but we're talking, a Section 8 housing, lower middle class type of stuff. And we didn't really do a lot in our community, and we were trying to reverse that trend. As pastors, we were trying to reach out to that section of the community, because what we were doing was just bypassing them and trying to go to the middle class and upper class people. And one of the elders in the room said, guys, poor people are not going to help us grow this church. We're going to waste our time doing food drives and reaching these poor people. And sure, they may come, but now we're going to have more people that we have to take care of with the same budget. Could we please focus on reaching some rich people? So as I cleaned my jaw up off the floor, my heart broke. Recognizing that this attitude is not just in society, but it is in our church. And this man was an elder of our church. And it's sad to say that although nobody said, yeah, I agree with you, that's the direction things went. Nobody wanted to go reach the poor people in the community because they weren't going to help us. Could we have more people like us? These poor people make me uncomfortable. Absolutely heartbreaking and unacceptable for the church. And we wonder why money divides us. Jesus doesn't care if you're rich or poor. He doesn't care if you're a successful businessman or it just seems that everything you try fails miserably. That's not how he assigns value to you. Jesus pursued Zacchaeus, the rich, greedy tax collector, just as much as he pursued the poor leper. And he wanted both of them to follow him just as much. He doesn't care, and he's not impressed by the amount of money you have in your bank account. The church has a couple of false gospels that get thrown around from time to time. One of them is the health, wealth, and happiness gospel, the prosperity gospel. God wants you to be rich. So if you're obedient to him, he'll give you more. That's not true. Jesus warns us that if we follow him, we may lose everything. So I don't really know where they get that in the Bible, but they teach it at lots of churches. But there's another gospel that's just as harmful and bad. It's the poverty gospel. The idea that if you were really an obedient Christian, you would sell all you owned and gave it to the poor. And then you could follow Jesus. Neither of those gospels stand up to the entirety of Scripture. The reality is that God, in the Old Testament, had both rich people and poor people that followed him. Most prophets, dirt poor. But Abraham, filthy rich. Solomon, richest man who ever lived. So does God love rich people or poor people? Yes. Jesus had women that were insanely wealthy that backed his ministry. And then he walked around and he healed beggars and lame people. And he put his hand on the leper and he healed him. So does Jesus love rich people or poor people? Yes. That's the reality that we have to stand in, that tension, that Jesus is not calling us to favor one group or the other because one can help us and maybe one can't, because one's a burden and the other one's not. Jesus calls us to love people because they're people, not because they're rich people or poor people or people like us. So how do we do this? Well, Jesus gives us the answer. Look at Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now Jesus, in this point, uses the analogy of a slave to his point. And I fear that because we don't understand slavery and the idea of what it means to be a slave, that the point may be lost on us. In today's world, it is quite possible, although difficult, but possible, to work two full-time jobs. I simply work at one, clock out, and then go to the other, and clock in. And that's how it works. And probably I don't get a lot of sleep. I don't get to go hang out with a lot of people that I want to hang out with. But I could do it. I could work legitimately two 40 to 50 hour a week jobs and hopefully watch the money rake in. But that's not what Jesus is talking about here. When you're a slave to someone, they're not your boss, they're your master. And the master determines every single thing you do as a slave. There is no clocking in and clocking out at the end of the day. It's, hey, day one, you're my slave, clock in, and then you don't clock out until you're dead. That's how it works. So you can't possibly have two masters. It would be impossible. You can't be like, bye, master one, I have to go serve master two, because then, no, it doesn't. You can't split yourself and work in two places at one time. It's not a job, it's your life. And Jesus is simply saying here, hey, you cannot serve both God and mammon. The Bible says you might have, say, money in them, but that's not really the Greek word that's there. It's mammon, and it has the idea of worldly things. Whatever you go to in this world that offers you comfort, that is mammon. And so we try to build things up in this world that bring us comfort, and that's mammon to us. And for a lot of us, that's money or things, or ice cream. But nonetheless, God is telling us, you have to make a choice. It's either me, or it's money, stuff, things, this world. So the question this morning is, what are you going to set your gaze on? Who is going to be your focus? Because you cannot be someone who pursues money and power and the things that come with it and then say, oh, let me sprinkle in a little bit of God. Jesus says so himself. So what's more important to you? Your stuff or your God? Whatever's more important to you is your God. And your stuff can be stolen from you, will rot, will become irrelevant, shirts get holes in them, buttons fall off, technology becomes obsolete, your house falls apart, your car rusts, breaks down, and is gone. But God is forever. He is eternal. What God do you want to serve? The answer to that question is important, Because based on your answer, it will determine how you treat people. It will determine what walls get broken down and what walls stay up. And for us as a congregation, if we don't choose wisely, we're going to keep these dividing walls up. And people are going to feel rejected. People are going to look at us and they're going to go, see, told you so. Told you Christians were hypocrites. Told you they didn't offer any hope in that place. But we do. So let's live like we do. Let's focus on the eternal God who offers us hope. As we come to our time of communion,